Australia, before the arrival of Europeans, was home to a diverse and ancient indigenous population. This land, with its vast deserts, lush rainforests and expansive coastlines, was inhabited by people who had a profound connection to their environment. For over 60,000 years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples thrived in this vast land. They adapted to its varied climates and terrains, developing unique ways of life that were in harmony with nature. They developed complex societies, rich cultures, and deep spiritual connections to their ancestral lands. Their art, music, and storytelling traditions were passed down through generations, preserving their history and knowledge. The British arrival in 1788 marked a turning point in Australian history, forever altering the course of the continent. The First Fleet's landing signaled the beginning of a new era, one that would bring profound changes to the Indigenous way of life. The arrival of the First Fleet under the command of Captain Arthur Phillip brought with it the seeds of a new nation, but also the beginning of a long and often painful colonial history for Indigenous Australians. The British settlers, with their unfamiliar customs and laws, began to impose their way of life on the land and its people. The British saw Australia as a terra nullius, an empty land ripe for the taking. This concept, meaning land belonging to no one, ignored the existing and sophisticated societies of the indigenous peoples. This misconception, fueled by a lack of understanding of indigenous laws and customs, had devastating consequences for the original inhabitants. The British settlers often failed to recognize the complex social structures and land management practices that had sustained indigenous communities for millennia. The establishment of British settlements led to the displacement of indigenous communities from their traditional lands. As the settlers expanded their territories, Indigenous Australians were pushed further away from their homes, disrupting their way of life. The introduction of new diseases, against which Indigenous Australians had no immunity, decimated populations. Smallpox, influenza, and other illnesses spread rapidly, causing widespread suffering and death. The imposition of British law and governance further eroded traditional ways of life. Indigenous Australians were subjected to foreign legal systems that did not recognise their customs or rights. Despite these hardships, Indigenous Australians showed remarkable resilience and resistance. They fought to preserve their culture, land, and identity in the face of overwhelming odds. They fought back against the encroachment on their lands and way of life. From the earliest days of colonization, there were acts of defiance and resistance as Indigenous Australians sought to protect their heritage. From the outset, there were clashes, misunderstandings, and acts of violence. These conflicts were often brutal and resulted in significant loss of life on both sides. The story of early British colonization is inextricably linked to the dispossession, oppression, and resilience of Indigenous peoples. Their struggles and resistance are a testament to their enduring spirit and determination. Their story, often untold or marginalized, is central to understanding the complexities of Australia's past and present. The legacy of colonization continues to impact Indigenous communities today, shaping their ongoing fight for recognition and justice. The arrival of the British also marked the beginning of a new chapter in global migration. People from various parts of the world began to see Australia as a land of opportunity. Convicts, soldiers, and free settlers from the British Isles and beyond would come to call Australia home. Each group brought with them their own hopes, dreams, and challenges. This influx of people with their diverse backgrounds, traditions, and aspirations would shape the cultural landscape of the nation. The blending of different cultures and experiences created a unique and dynamic society that continues to evolve today. The late 18th century saw Britain grappling with overcrowded prisons. The Industrial Revolution had led to rapid urbanization, and with it a surge in crime rates. The existing prison infrastructure was woefully inadequate to handle the influx of convicts, leading to dire conditions within these facilities. Transportation, the shipping of convicts to penal colonies, offered a solution. This practice was not new. Britain had previously sent convicts to the American colonies. However, with the American Revolution, that option was no longer viable. The British government needed a new destination for its convicts. Australia, at the edge of the known world, became the destination for thousands of men and women deemed undesirable by British society. The vast, uncharted land presented both an opportunity and a challenge. It was a place where Britain could offload its convicts while also expanding its empire. The arrival of the First Fleet in 1788, with its cargo of over 1,000 convicts and their jailers, marked the founding of the colony of New South Wales. This fleet, consisting of 11 ships, had endured a grueling 8-month journey across treacherous seas to reach the distant shores of Australia. Life for these early colonists was harsh. The land was unfamiliar, the climate unforgiving, and the resources scarce. The convicts, many of whom were city dwellers, had little experience with farming or survival in such a remote and rugged environment. The land, unfamiliar and often unforgiving, had to be tamed. The settlers had to clear dense bushland, cultivate crops, and build shelters from scratch. The initial years were marked by back-breaking labor and a constant struggle to produce enough food to sustain the fledgling colony. Food was scarce and the threat of disease ever present. The settlers faced frequent food shortages and malnutrition was common. Diseases such as scurvy, dysentery and typhoid took a heavy toll on the population, further exacerbating the colony's struggles. The colony's early years were marked by struggle, both against the elements and the strictures of a penal system designed to punish and reform. The convicts were subjected to harsh discipline and forced labor, with the hope that they would be reformed through hard work and strict oversight. Yet, amidst the hardship, a new society began to emerge. The convicts, despite their circumstances, began to form a community. They built homes, established families, and started to lay the foundations of what would become a thriving colony. From these inauspicious beginnings, a unique culture began to take root. The harsh conditions fostered a spirit of resilience and resourcefulness among the settlers. They developed a strong sense of camaraderie and mutual support, essential for survival in such a challenging environment. The convicts, drawn from all levels of British society, brought with them their skills, their stories, and their dreams of a better life. Many were skilled tradesmen, artisans, and labourers who contributed significantly to the colony's development. Their diverse backgrounds enriched the cultural fabric of the emerging society. Emancipists, convicts who had earned their freedom, played a vital role in the colony's development, establishing businesses, farming the land, and contributing to the growth of civic institutions. Their efforts were instrumental in transforming the penal colony into a prosperous settlement. The mark of the convict era left an indelible stain on the Australian psyche, a source of shame for some, a badge of honour for others. This complex legacy continues to influence Australia's national identity, shaping its cultural narratives and societal values. This period also saw the emergence of a distinctive Australian identity, one forged in the crucible of hardship and resilience, with a strong streak of independence and a healthy disrespect for authority. This identity, characterised by a pioneering spirit and a sense of egalitarianism, would become a defining feature of Australian culture. This spirit, born in the shadow of the penal colony, would come to define much of Australia's subsequent history. The resilience, resourcefulness and independence that emerged from these early years laid the foundation for a nation that would grow to be proud of its unique heritage and identity. As the colony of New South Wales grew, so too did the thirst for land. The early settlers, driven by the promise of new opportunities and the desire to establish a foothold in this new world, began to push beyond the coastal regions. They sought fertile lands and resources that would ensure their survival and prosperity in this unfamiliar territory. Explorers ventured into the interior, mapping the vastness of the continent and encountering its indigenous inhabitants. These expeditions were often perilous, with explorers facing harsh climates, rugged terrains, and the challenge of navigating through unknown lands. Their encounters with Indigenous Australians were complex, ranging from moments of mutual curiosity and exchange to instances of misunderstanding and conflict. Pastoralists, eager for grazing land for their sheep and cattle, followed in their wake. They established vast pastoral runs, transforming the landscape with their agricultural activities. The introduction of European farming practices and livestock had a profound impact on the environment and the traditional ways of life of the indigenous peoples. This expansion, however, came at a cost. The clearing of land for settlement and agriculture disrupted the natural ecosystems and displaced indigenous communities. The settlers' encroachment on traditional lands led to tensions and conflicts as the indigenous Australians sought to defend their territories and way of life. The Frontier Wars, a series of violent conflicts between settlers and indigenous Australians, marked a dark chapter in the nation's history. These wars were characterized by brutal skirmishes, massacres, and acts of resistance. The impact of these conflicts was devastating, leading to significant loss of life and the further marginalization of indigenous communities. The discovery of gold in New South Wales and Victoria in the 1850s brought with it a new wave of immigration. The allure of striking it rich drew people from all corners of the globe, creating a melting pot of cultures and backgrounds. The goldfields became a bustling hub of activity, with prospectors working tirelessly in the hopes of finding fortune. People from all over the world flocked to Australia, lured by the promise of riches. Ships arrived daily, bringing hopeful immigrants who dreamed of a better life. The influx of people led to the rapid growth of towns and settlements as new arrivals sought to make their mark on the burgeoning colony. Towns sprang up overnight and the population swelled. Makeshift structures and tents gave way to more permanent buildings as the gold rush towns evolved. These settlements were often chaotic and lawless, with a transient population driven by the pursuit of wealth. The gold rush transformed Australia from a backwater penal colony into a booming economic powerhouse. The wealth generated from gold mining fueled infrastructure development, commerce, and trade. It also attracted investment and spurred technological advancements, laying the foundation for Australia's future growth. This period of rapid change brought with it new challenges. The sudden population boom placed immense pressure on resources and infrastructure. Towns struggled to keep up with the demand for housing, sanitation, and public services, leading to overcrowded and unsanitary living conditions. The influx of migrants placed a strain on resources and infrastructure. Water supplies, food and medical services were stretched thin, and the rapid urbanization led to environmental degradation. The authorities faced the daunting task of managing this unprecedented growth and maintaining order in the rapidly expanding settlements. Social tensions simmered as people from diverse backgrounds and cultures were thrown together. The goldfields were a melting pot of nationalities, languages and customs, leading to both cultural exchange and friction. Competition for resources and opportunities often exacerbated these tensions, resulting in conflicts and social unrest. The treatment of Chinese miners in particular highlighted the racism and xenophobia that often accompanied periods of rapid social and economic change. Chinese immigrants faced discrimination, violence, and exclusion, as they were seen as competitors and outsiders. This period saw the rise of anti-Chinese sentiment and the implementation of restrictive policies aimed at limiting their presence in the goldfields. Yet the gold rush also had a profound impact on the development of Australian democracy. The diverse and often politically active population brought with them ideas of equality, representation, and civil rights. The goldfields became a hotbed of political activity, with miners organizing and advocating for their rights. The newly arrived diggers, many of whom had fled poverty and oppression in their homelands, demanded a say in how they were governed. They sought fair treatment, better working conditions, and a voice in the political process. Their collective actions laid the groundwork for significant political reforms in the colony. The Eureka Stockade, a rebellion by gold miners in 1854, became a potent symbol of this fight for political rights and a fairer society. The uprising, though ultimately unsuccessful, galvanized public opinion and led to important changes in the political landscape. It is remembered as a defining moment in Australia's journey towards democracy and social justice.